Welcome back to Frost and Embers. With the release of the new Avatar film, which I have guiltily not gone to see yet, I decided I would create some kind of Avatar-inspired creature. I decided to base it on a manta ray, so I've just started with a foil armature as always, building up a rough shape and using masking tape to hold those bits together. Once I had a shape I was happy with, I just went in with some blue coloured clay and started to cover the base. I've tried a variety of different methods in order to colour my cosplay, but I have found that the grated pastels tends to work the best, but it is a long process. Once the armature was covered and smoothed out, I just went in and started playing around with a couple of ideas. I didn't sketch out anything beforehand, but I did have a rough idea of how I wanted this to look, so I just go in here with a couple of different pieces of clay and start building up a rough shape. My main inspiration for this was a manta ray and stingrays in general, so I'm just kind of stealing different aspects of those in order to try and create my own version of this. I just want to point out that there is absolutely no anatomical reason for anything that I put on this manta ray. It is purely for the aesthetic, so I wish I could justify why I did certain things, but unfortunately I didn't really think that far ahead. I really did want this creature to have that Avatar, Pandora, otherworldly kind of look to it. So I decided to give it 3 eyes. I did experiment with 3, but it just didn't quite look right. So the 2 eyes I think gave it that very otherworldly feel. Drawing more inspiration from the manta ray, I wanted this creature ultimately to be incredibly gentle, like some of the creatures in Avatar. Obviously you get some that are perhaps not as gentle as others, but in the way of water, most of those sea creatures seemed quite placid, and I really wanted to draw on that, but also upon the natural behaviours and personalities is probably the wrong word, of manta rays as well. So again, these have absolutely no anatomical purpose. I just thought they would look kind of cool, and almost perhaps drawing on the anglerfish kind of vibe, because I want to have the ends of these to be bioluminescent, I want them to glow, but these are not carnivorous animals, so I would like it to be just, again, perhaps I will be able to delve into a little bit more of that lore if I think about it, but again, just another nice aesthetic feature to this Avatar inspired manta ray. I do start covering this antenna in some blue cosplay. I do later go and take that off and decide to do it in a different colour later on instead, in a slightly different method, but I think it's helpful sometimes to see the trial and error. So as far as I'm aware, manta rays do not have gills in the traditional sense of fish. However, I decided I was going to put some kind of gills on here. Perhaps it is sort of a filter feeding thing, maybe it's for oxygen, although I'm not sure how that would be particularly useful being on the so-called wing of the manta ray. But I did decide to kind of hollow these sections out, and I wanted these to sort of be protective areas because these creatures are so gentle and intelligent. This is sort of a safe space for those kind of feeder fish and more vulnerable animals, including the Na'vi can also sort of ride on those wings and be sheltered there. So that is kind of this whole purpose of these big alcoves, almost sort of cave-like structures, so to speak, on the wing. And then on the front of those we have got those gills, so perhaps it could be some kind of like filtering system for the manta ray to get a certain kind of nutrient maybe, but I just thought it was a bit different and it kind of looked cool. And obviously no ray would be complete without a tail, but I decided again to give it a slightly different spin. I wanted to give it two, and again there are going to be glow-in-the-dark bioluminescent aspects to these tails as well. And here I'm just adding an extra fin for a little bit more visual interest, but I also want these creatures to be majestic but incredibly strong, so I felt like giving them the two fins can help with that speed, but still keeping with that grace. Cosplay is designed to be very bendy, however I do decide to go in and reinforce it on the opposite side just to give it that extra strength. I wanted to make the antennae green just to mix up a little bit that colour variation. I do still very much want to stick to the stereotypical avatar colours in terms of the Na'vi, but I did think a little bit more of a kind of green tying in with the ocean theme would work quite nicely. So this is exactly how I coloured the blue clay, by just scraping off that pastel and then dipping the clay in there and just conditioning it until it was nice and mixed through. I just went ahead and did a whole variety of these so that I could have some antennae at the top as well as the antennae at the bottom as well, just to make it again a little bit more interesting. So I then went and baked those and then I pushed them into the clay. It just makes them hold their shape a lot better, they're far more durable that way, less likely to break. And then I go in with my pastels and start with the pattern. I strongly recommend using something to lift and to be able to move your sculpture around on when it comes to painting, particularly if you are painting the piece before you bake it. Otherwise you just end up squashing details, it gets grubby because your fingers are constantly touching it, and this ice cream lid just worked perfectly for that. It allowed me to be able to move it around without squashing it or without any of the tiny little details breaking. Again, I really didn't have much of a plan when it came to the painting. I just decided to give it a go and intuitively see what happened when I started to put some patterning on there. I was trying to follow the stereotypical patterning on the Na'vi, but I just played around with it and had a little bit of fun. All of the products will be listed in the description box below, along with my Amazon affiliate links if you wanted to grab any of these products or tools for yourself. This part was purely experimental and I really was not sure if it was going to work or not. It was a bit of a gamble, but I decided to mix up some of my liquid Sculpey with some of the glow-in-the-dark cosplay and just dot it very thinly across the back of the body to see if it would give me that bioluminescent glow-in-the-dark feel to it when it was baked. But it was very much a gamble. I was not sure if this was going to work, but spoiler, it did work and I was really pleased with the outcome. Here I'm making the fins to go on the back of the tail, so to speak, and I'm using some of the glow-in-the-dark cosplay, the same stuff that I used to make the ghost in the previous video. I wanted these to almost resemble petals. Even though this was a sea creature, I do feel like they have some beautiful exotic plants in on Pandora, so I kind of experimented a little bit with that and gave them some patterning there to just have very subtle petal-like features to them. So one thing I would have done differently, particularly with the glow-in-the-dark dots, is I would have put the white acrylic paint on first and then put the glow-in-the-dark stuff on top in order to really make it pop. I feel like it sort of made it stand out a little bit too much here and dulled down the bioluminescent dots, but ultimately I'm pretty happy. And now it's time for the reveal. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!